My name is Nora. I was 64 the evening I realized my own dining room had been hijacked. The smell of roasted garlic and rosemary filled the air a meal I had paid for and cooked, but my daughter-in-law Chloe acted as the gracious host. She had invited 3 of her friends over for Sunday dinner without asking me, treating my home like her personal event space. Chloe stood at the head of the table. She clinked her glass and said, "Some people have earned their place at this table." Then she smirked at me. It was a calculated look, dripping with condescension. She had spent the last 10 months subtly pushing me out of my own life, rearranging my furniture, criticizing my cooking, and treating me like an outdated fixture in the house I owned. Everyone laughed. Mark, my son, chuckled into his napkin, avoiding my gaze. Chloe's friends giggled, clearly briefed on the narrative that I was just the tiresome old mother-in-law they were doing a favor by living with. Everyone laughed except my husband, Arthur. I had been a widow for 10 years, before marrying Arthur just 12 months ago. He knew the struggles I faced, and he saw right through Chloe's polite venom. Arthur tapped his water glass with a silver spoon. The sharp ping cut through the obnoxious chuckles. "And some people," Arthur stated evenly, staring directly at Chloe, "forget whose house they are sitting in." The room suddenly went dead, silent. You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Chloe's friends froze forks halfway to their mouths. Mark blinked, his face flushing deep red. He looked at Arthur, then at me, expecting me to smooth things over, to play the peacekeeper, like I always did, to avoid conflict. I didn't. I calmly picked up my wine glass, took a slow sip, and matched Arthur's unwavering gaze. The dynamic in this house was about to change permanently, and the realization was just starting to dawn on them. The silence stretched. Chloe's smile vanished, replaced by a tight, thin line. She opened and closed her mouth twice before finding her voice. "Arthur, that was incredibly rude," Chloe stated, feigning shock. I was making a joke. "Humor usually involves a punchline, not an insult," Arthur replied, returning his attention to his meal. Mark finally found his spine, though he used it to defend the wrong person. "Come on, Arthur. It's just dinner. No need to make things awkward. Mom, tell him to chill out." 10 years as a widow had taught me how to survive, but letting Mark and Chloe move in had slowly worn down my boundaries. They arrived under the guise of saving for a down payment. Slowly, my routines were erased. Chloe dictated the grocery list. Mark used my garage as a storage unit. I was a guest in a home with no mortgage, fully paid off by my late husband and me. I placed my napkin neatly on the table. Arthur is perfectly chill, Mark. And he is absolutely right. Chloe scoffed, crossing her arms defensively. "We do so much for you, Nora. We keep this house alive." I looked around my spotless dining room, maintained entirely by my own hands. "You live here rent-free. You eat food I buy. You use electricity I pay for. The only thing you keep alive is your own bank account." Her friends looked completely mortified. One of them slowly stood up, muttering an excuse about an early morning meeting. Within 5 minutes, the guests had practically sprinted out the front door, leaving the 4 of us in a heavy, suffocating quiet. Chloe glared at me, her cheeks burning red. "You ruined the evening." "No," I corrected her, stacking my empty plate on top of Arthur's. "I just stopped pretending I was enjoying it." I walked into the kitchen, scraping the leftovers into the trash. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was just done. Tomorrow, the free ride would end. The next morning, the house was blissfully quiet. Mark and Chloe usually slept in until 9, treating my home like a boutique hotel. I sat at the kitchen island with Arthur, a cup of black coffee warming my hands, and opened my laptop. For months, I had given Mark a joint credit card. The agreement was simple: use it for shared household groceries and emergency supplies only. I had noticed the bills creeping up, but I usually paid them without looking too closely, wanting to avoid a confrontation. Not today. I pulled up the current statement. Coffee shops, designer clothing stores, expensive lunches downtown, and a recurring charge for a premium gym membership I certainly didn't use. They were funding their entire social lifestyle on my dime. Arthur leaned over, scanning the screen. He let out a low whistle. That's a lot of groceries. It stops now, I stated calmly, clicking through the bank's portal. I didn't yell. I didn't storm upstairs and bang on their bedroom door. I simply navigated to the card management tab, selected the physical card with Mark's name on it, and clicked deactivate. A wave of profound relief washed over me. I wasn't going to argue about receipts or demand repayment for the past. I was just shutting off the tap. Next, I logged into my internet provider's application. Chloe worked from home, a job that required constant, high-speed access. She often complained my router wasn't fast enough. I went into the settings and changed the Wi-Fi password. Arthur chuckled, sipping his tea. "You're ruthless, Nora." "I am practical," I answered. "If they want to act like independent adults who run this house, they can pay for their own infrastructure." I printed the credit card statement, highlighted the non-grocery charges in bright yellow, and left it on the kitchen counter right next to the coffee maker. I didn't leave a note. Then Arthur and I grabbed our coats. We had a lovely brunch reservation across town, and I fully intended to enjoy every single bite. Arthur and I were enjoying perfectly poached eggs when my phone started vibrating in my purse. I glanced at the screen. Mark. I let it ring. 2 minutes later, a text popped up. "Mom, the card declined at the grocery store." "Is something wrong with the account?" I typed back instantly. "The account is fine. Your card is canceled. Check the kitchen counter." I slid the phone away and returned to my meal. It was liberating. For so long, I had tiptoed around their moods, terrified of being the difficult mother-in-law. Chloe had manipulated my fear of isolation, convincing me that without them, my house would feel empty. But sitting here with Arthur laughing over coffee, I realized their entitled presence was the only thing making my life miserable. We arrived home around 2 in the afternoon. The energy in the house was volatile. Mark and Chloe were pacing in the living room. The highlighted bank statement was clutched tightly in Chloe's hand. "What is this?" Nora, Chloe demanded the moment we walked through the door. She dropped the respectful tone she usually reserved for her audience of friends. "That is a list of things you purchased with my money," I replied, calmly hanging up my coat. Mark stepped forward, looking stressed. "Mom, you didn't have to cut us off without warning. It was humiliating at the register. You didn't warn me when you charged $300 at a boutique," I countered, walking past them toward the kitchen. "The card was for household food. You broke the agreement. The card is gone." Chloe threw the paper onto the coffee table. "We are family. You have more than enough money." "Why are you being so stingy?" "Family respects boundaries," Arthur chimed in, leaning casually against the doorframe. "You two respect nothing but yourselves." Chloe sneered at him. "Stay out of this. You're just a guest here." I turned around, locking eyes with her. "Arthur is my husband. This is his home. You two are the guests, and your welcome is expiring." The tension in the house shifted from cold to openly hostile. Chloe began a campaign of petty inconveniences. She would leave her laundry in the machines for days, fill the entire fridge with her expensive meal preps, and play loud music in the evenings. She wanted me to snap. She wanted a screaming match so she could play the victim. I refused to give her the satisfaction. Instead of arguing about the laundry, I calmly took her wet clothes out, placed them in a cheap plastic basket, and set it outside her bedroom door. When she complained about her meal preps disappearing, I reminded her that my kitchen refrigerator space was reserved for my groceries. Anything else was moved to the garage fridge. But the most effective move was the climate control. My house had a smart thermostat system allowing me to control the temperature in different zones from my phone. Mark and Chloe occupied the entire east wing upstairs. I opened the app and adjusted the settings for their wing. I turned off the air conditioning up there. It was mid-July. By evening, the heat upstairs was stifling. Mark came down sweating and looking miserable. "Mom, the AC is broken upstairs." "It's not broken," Mark, I answered, flipping through a home design magazine. "I turned it off." He stared at me dumbfounded. "Why?" "Because electricity is expensive," I explained smoothly. "Since you two are saving for your own place, I decided to help you along by cutting my expenses. If you want climate control in your wing, you can set up an account with the utility company." Chloe stormed down the stairs, fanning herself with a folder. "You can't do this. It's 85 degrees up there." "My house, my utility bill, my rules," I replied, not raising my voice. "If the conditions here are unsatisfactory, I suggest you expedite your house hunt." Mark looked defeated, but Chloe's eyes narrowed. She realized my kindness had completely evaporated, replaced by cold, unyielding boundaries. The heat wave upstairs forced them to spend more time in the common areas, which meant more time glaring at Arthur and me. Chloe tried to reassert her dominance by inviting her friends over again for a casual Friday night. She didn't ask. She just announced it. "I need the kitchen clear by 5, she stated on Friday morning, pouring herself a coffee. I looked up from my iPad. "That won't be possible. Arthur and I are cooking dinner tonight," she scoffed. "I already invited people, Nora. Just eat in the living room." I didn't argue. I didn't tell her to cancel. I simply waited until 4 o'clock when she went upstairs to shower. Then I walked to the front door, engaged the heavy deadbolt, and flipped the security chain. Next, I went to the kitchen and began prepping a massive, elaborate roast. At 5:30, the doorbell rang. Chloe rushed downstairs, her hair perfectly styled, but when she reached the door, she couldn't open it because of the chain. "Nora, open the door," she hissed, pulling frantically at the metal link. "I am not expecting company," I called out from the kitchen, tossing vegetables in olive oil. "My friends are out there." "Then you should go out and meet them at a restaurant," I suggested. "Because they aren't coming into my house." Chloe yanked the door shut and stomped into the kitchen, her face twisted in anger. "You are doing this on purpose to humiliate me." I stopped chopping carrots and looked at her directly. "You humiliated me at my own dining table. You spend my money. You disregard my schedule. You are not hosting a party in my home ever again." Mark walked in, sensing the conflict. Chloe spun to him. "Do something. Tell your mother to unlock the door." Mark looked at the door, then at me. My expression was stone. He sighed heavily. "Chloe, let's just go out. I'll pay." Defeated by his passivity, she grabbed her purse and stormed out. The weekend passed in stony silence. Mark avoided me, and Chloe treated me like a ghost. But I was done waiting for them to take the hint. Action was the only language they understood. Monday morning, after they both left for work, I drove to the local hardware store and bought 30 cardboard moving boxes and 3 rolls of packing tape. I hauled them back to the house and carried them upstairs to the East Wing hallway. I didn't touch their personal items, clothes, electronics, or private documents. That wasn't my style. Instead, I packed up the things they had scattered throughout my house. Chloe's expensive decorative pillows that had replaced mine in the living room. Mark's gaming consoles from my den. Chloe's massive collection of specialized cooking gadgets that cluttered my kitchen counters. I packed them neatly, taped the boxes shut, and stacked them in the hallway outside their bedroom door. By 5 o'clock, my house looked like mine again. The living room breathed. The kitchen counters were clear. When they arrived home, I was sitting on the sofa with Arthur watching a historical documentary. We heard their footsteps on the stairs, followed by a sudden, sharp halt. "What is this?" Mark called down. Arthur paused the TV. I walked to the bottom of the stairs, looking up at them. Those are your belongings from the common areas. I am reclaiming my space. Chloe gripped the banister, her knuckles white. You are kicking us out. I am giving you a deadline, I corrected. You have 30 days to find a new place to live. After that, the locks will be changed. You can't do that to your own son. Mark pleaded, finally showing some genuine panic. Mom, rent is crazy right now. You've lived here free for over a year, I reminded him. You should have a substantial savings account. If you don't, that is a failure of your own planning, not my responsibility. The reality of the situation finally crashed down on them. No safety net, no free ride. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in passive aggression, but I remained entirely unaffected. I stuck to my routine. Arthur and I gardened, took evening walks, and cooked together. Mark and Chloe frantically scrolled through apartment listings on their phones during dinner. Realizing I wouldn't budge, Chloe tried a different tactic. She tried to divide and conquer. One afternoon, while I was out running errands, she cornered Arthur in the garage. She put on her most sympathetic face, the one she used to manipulate Mark. Arthur, I know we started off on the wrong foot, she began, her voice sickeningly sweet. But you have to talk to Nora. She's being unreasonable. Mark is her only son. You don't want to be the reason she loses her family, do you? Arthur didn't even pause what he was doing. He continued wiping down his workbench. Chloe, I am not the reason Nora is setting boundaries. You are. She dropped the sweet act instantly. You're manipulating her. You want the house to yourself. Arthur chuckled, a deep, genuine sound. I have my own house, which we rent out. I don't need Nora's money or her property. I just want my wife to be treated with respect. A concept you seem fundamentally unable to grasp. When Arthur recounted the conversation to me later that evening, I felt a deep surge of affection for him. I also felt vindicated. Chloe had exposed her true nature completely. With 10 days left on my timeline, I noticed the Wi-Fi router was missing from the den. Chloe had taken it upstairs to her room to try and hoard the connection for work. I didn't confront her. I simply called the provider, canceled that specific router, and activated a new private hotspot for Arthur and myself. They spent the entire weekend burning through their expensive mobile data. Every time they tried to outsmart me, I simply sidestepped, letting their own actions create their discomfort. They were running out of options, and time was up. Moving day arrived on a crisp Saturday morning. A small rental truck was parked in my driveway. I stood by the kitchen window, holding a mug of tea, watching as Mark and his friends loaded boxes. Chloe directed them, looking exhausted and thoroughly defeated. I had drafted a simple checklist of the items that belonged to the house, holding it on a clipboard. I wasn't taking any chances with my possessions. As they hauled the last few pieces of furniture out, Chloe tried to carry my antique entryway mirror toward the truck. I stepped out the front door. Put the mirror down, Chloe. She froze, clutching the heavy wooden frame. Mark said we could have this for our new apartment. I glanced at Mark, who immediately looked down at his shoes. Mark doesn't own that mirror. It belonged to my grandmother. Leave it. She glared at me, her chest heaving. For a second, I thought she might throw it. But Arthur stepped up beside me, his presence solid and unwavering. Chloe set the mirror aggressively against the wall. You're going to regret this. Nora, she spat, walking toward the truck. You'll never see us. You'll never see any future grandkids. You're going to die alone. I didn't flinch. 10 years ago, those words would have broken me. I would have folded, apologized, and let her walk all over me just to keep the peace. But I wasn't that scared widow anymore. I am not alone, I replied, clearly glancing at Arthur. And if the cost of seeing you is my peace of mind, it's a price I am no longer willing to pay. Goodbye, Mark. Mark hesitated by the passenger door. He looked like he wanted to say something, an apology or an excuse, but Chloe honked the horn impatiently. He climbed in, shutting the door heavily. The truck backed out of the driveway and rumbled down the street. I watched until it turned the corner, finally out of sight. When the sound of the engine faded, a profound silence settled over the property. It wasn't the heavy, anxious silence that used to hang in the air after one of Chloe's remarks. It was clean. It was peaceful. Arthur wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "How do you feel?" I took a deep breath of the cool morning air. Like I just deep cleaned the entire house. We went inside and locked the door. The first thing I did was call the locksmith. By noon, every exterior lock on the house was changed. It wasn't out of fear. It was a final physical boundary confirming that access to my life was a privilege, not a right. Months passed. Mark texted occasionally on holidays, short, generic messages. I replied politely, but I never initiated. I didn't ask about their apartment, and I didn't offer financial help when I heard through a relative that they were struggling to manage their budget. They were adults. They had to learn. I realized that for years I had believed that being a good mother meant endless sacrifice. I thought enduring disrespect was just the price of keeping a family under one roof. But true love doesn't demand you erase yourself. My home transformed. The guest rooms became an art studio for me and a study for Arthur. We hosted dinners with our own friends, dinners where the laughter was genuine, the wine flowed freely, and nobody used a toast to tear someone else down. Sometimes I look at the head of the dining table where Chloe used to sit smirking and demanding attention. The memory doesn't sting anymore. It just serves as a quiet reminder of what I survived. You can't control how other people treat you initially, but you have absolute authority over how long you let them stay at your table. And in my house, my seat was finally secured. Looking back, the biggest lesson I took from all of this wasn't about money, property, or getting even. It was about recognizing my own worth. For years, I genuinely believed that being a good mother and mother-in-law meant shrinking myself to keep the peace. I thought if I just compromised a little more, accommodated a little more, they would eventually respect me. But the truth I had to learn the hard way is that you can't buy respect, and you shouldn't have to sacrifice your own mental health just to keep family around. Setting a boundary didn't mean I stopped loving my son. It just meant I finally decided to love myself too. We often feel guilty for protecting our own space, but sometimes letting go of people who constantly drain you is the only way to breathe again. And let me tell you, the peace of mind that comes after is worth every single uncomfortable conversation. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to make a really tough decision to set boundaries and protect your own peace, I'd love to read about it. Please share your experiences in the comments below. I read every single one, and we can all learn so much from each other's journeys. If you want to hear more stories about real life finding your voice and standing your ground, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new video. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, your peace is always worth protecting. See you in the next one.